The call came just before dawn. A stranger's voice. Calm. Official. Mr. Marcus, we need you to come in. I asked why. There was a pause. Someone was found last night. Silence pressed against my ear. He listed you as his father. My throat went dry. That's impossible, I said, because I never had a son. My name is Marcus Hale. I'm 62, and I live alone outside Boise, Idaho. I thought my life had settled into quiet routines, until that phone call dragged something from the past I didn't even know existed. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me in the comments, where are you listening from? I didn't sleep after the call. I sat at my kitchen table watching the sky turn from black to a dull gray, the phone still in my hand like it might ring again and tell me this was all a mistake. A body, a man, listed me as his father. I kept repeating that part in my head because it was the only piece that didn't fit. I had never had kids. Not that I knew of. Not that I'd ever been told. My life had been simple, almost boring by most standards. A long career managing warehouse logistics, a short marriage in my 30s that ended quietly, and decades of living alone after that. No dramatic secrets. No wild past. At least, that's what I believed. By 7:30 a.m., I'd already poured 2 coffees down the sink untouched. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Finally, I grabbed my coat, my wallet, and my keys. The drive into town felt longer than it ever had. Every red light stretched. Every passing car felt too loud. My mind kept trying to fill in answers I didn't have. Maybe it was identity theft. Maybe some guy needed a name for paperwork. Maybe it was just a clerical error. But none of those explanations made my chest feel tight the way it did. The medical examiner's office sat in a low brick building near the courthouse. I'd passed it 100 times before without ever noticing it. Now it looked colder than the morning air, the windows reflecting nothing back. Inside, the air smelled like disinfectant and stale coffee. A woman behind the counter looked up as I stepped in. She didn't smile, but her expression softened when she asked my name. Marcus Hale. She nodded once, like she'd been expecting me, and picked up the phone beside her. He's here. Those 2 words made my stomach drop. A few minutes later, a man in a dark blazer came through a side door. He introduced himself as Detective Alvarez. His handshake was firm, but his eyes studied me like he was measuring something. Mr. Hale, thank you for coming in. I know this is unexpected. That's one word for it, I muttered. He led me down a quiet hallway into a small office with metal chairs and a desk stacked with folders. He gestured for me to sit. I didn't. I stayed standing. Before anything else, I said, "You need to explain how someone I've never met has my name listed as his father." He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he opened a file and slid a plastic evidence bag across the desk. Inside was a worn leather wallet. "Found on the deceased," he said. "Your name was written on a folded piece of paper inside, not printed, handwritten." I stared at the bag. The wallet looked cheap, cracked at the corners, the kind someone might carry for years. "Could be coincidence," I said. "Common name." Alvarez shook his head slightly. "There's more." He pulled out another sheet of photocopy. This was in the same wallet. I leaned closer. It was a photograph, old, faded, slightly bent at the edges. In it, a young woman stood in front of what looked like a motel balcony. She was smiling, holding a toddler on her hip. The toddler's face was turned halfway toward the camera. I felt something twist in my chest. "Do you recognize her?" Alvarez asked quietly. I opened my mouth to say no, but the word didn't come out, because I did recognize her. Not instantly, not clearly, but somewhere in the back of my mind, buried under decades of dust, something shifted. Her name floated up before I could stop it. Lena. I hadn't spoken that name in over 30 years. Alvarez's pen paused. "You know her?" I sat down without meaning to. "Yeah," I said slowly. "A long time ago. We worked together for a summer. Just a summer job. Nothing serious." My voice sounded distant, like it wasn't even mine. "What about the child?" he asked. I swallowed. I never knew she had one. The detective watched me for a long moment, then nodded once. "Mr. Hale, the man we found was approximately 30 years old, based on what we've been able to gather, He had been living transiently for a while. No stable address. No immediate family we could locate. He tapped the photo gently. This was the only personal item connecting him to someone. I stared at the image again, the child's eyes. I hadn't noticed them before, but now I did. Brown, dark, familiar. My stomach dropped. That doesn't prove anything, I said quickly. People write names down all the time. Could have been a mistake. Could have been someone told him something wrong. Alvarez didn't argue. Which is why we need you to look, he said. The room felt smaller. Look at what? He held my gaze. The body. The words hit heavier than I expected. I'd been to funerals, seen open caskets, said goodbyes, but this was different. This was someone who might be tied to me in a way I'd never imagined, or maybe not tied at all. Either way, once I saw him, there'd be no pretending the call never happened. I rubbed my palms against my jeans. How did he die? Exposure, Alvarez said quietly. Cold night, no shelter. That twisted something deeper inside me, because suddenly this wasn't just a mystery. It was a person, a real one, a life that had ended alone, and somehow, in his last days, my name had mattered enough for him to carry it in his wallet. I let out a slow breath. Okay, I said finally. I'll look. Alvarez nodded once and stood. As we stepped into the hallway, the fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Each step felt louder than it should have. At the end of the corridor, a metal door waited. He stopped beside it and rested his hand on the handle. Take your time, he said. I nodded, but my throat had already gone dry, because for the first time since the call, I wasn't sure I wanted the answer anymore. The metal door opened with a soft click. Cold air drifted out, carrying that sterile metallic smell you never forget once you've known it. Detective Alvarez didn't rush me. He simply stepped aside and let me walk in first. The room was quiet. Too quiet. Stainless steel counters. Cabinets. A single overhead light buzzing faintly. Somewhere deeper inside, a refrigeration unit hummed steadily like a heartbeat. A medical examiner in blue scrubs stood near one of the tables. She gave me a gentle nod. Mr. Hale, she said, I'm Dr. Sutton. I'll guide you through this. If at any point you need to stop, just say so. I nodded, though I wasn't sure my voice would cooperate if I tried to speak. She pulled a clipboard from the counter. Before we begin, I should mention identification doesn't have to be visual. If you're unsure, we can confirm through DNA later. I swallowed. I'll look first. She gave a small, understanding nod and motioned toward the covered form on the table. Each step toward it felt heavier than the last. My palms were damp, my pulse loud in my ears. I stopped at the edge of the table. Dr. Sutton placed her hands gently on the sheet. Ready? I didn't answer. I just nodded once. She folded the sheet back slowly. And for a second, my brain refused to process what I was seeing. The man looked younger than I expected. Maybe late 20s, early 30s. His face was pale, lips slightly parted, dark hair flattened from the cold. There were faint lines at the corners of his eyes that suggested he'd smiled a lot in life, or maybe worried a lot. I stared at him, searching for anything that would tell me this had nothing to do with me. Nothing came. Do you recognize him? Dr. Sutton asked softly. No, I whispered. I've never seen him before. And that part was true. I didn't know his face, but something about him still felt familiar. It wasn't obvious. Not like looking into a mirror. It was subtler than that. The shape of his jaw, the slope of his nose, something in the brow line, the kind of resemblance you don't notice until you stop trying not to see it. I forced myself to look longer, trying to be rational. I never knew Lena had a kid, I said quietly. We dated for a few months, that's it. She moved away, we lost touch. This can't be what you think. Alvarez stepped forward beside me. We're not assuming anything yet, he said calmly. But we did find something else. He handed Dr. Sutton another evidence bag. She passed it to me. Inside was a folded piece of paper. I hesitated before opening it, like I somehow already knew this would make things harder. The paper was worn, creased from being folded and unfolded many times. On it, written in uneven pen strokes, was a short note. If anything happens to me, please call Marcus Hale. He deserves to know. My throat tightened. Did he write this? I asked. Yes, Alvarez said. Handwriting matches other notes we found in his belongings. I stared at the sentence. He deserves to know. Know what? I felt a sudden sharp pressure behind my eyes. This doesn't make sense, I muttered. If he thought I was his father, why didn't he ever try to find me? Why wait until now? That's what we're trying to figure out, Alvarez replied. He didn't have much. No phone, no stable address. But we did locate a backpack he kept at a shelter. There might be more answers there. Dr. Sutton gently covered the body again, giving me space to breathe. I stepped back, running a hand over my face. I need air, I said. Alvarez nodded and led me back out into the hallway. The warmth there felt almost suffocating after the cold room. We stopped near a row of plastic chairs. I sat heavily, elbows on my knees. This doesn't prove anything, I said again, though my voice sounded weaker this time. It could still be a misunderstanding. Maybe, Alvarez said, but we should follow the trail. He checked his watch. The shelter staff are holding his belongings for us. If you're up for it, we can head there now. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to walk out, get in my truck, drive home, and pretend none of this had ever happened. But another part, the louder part, needed to know. Yeah, I said quietly. Let's go. The shelter sat on the edge of downtown, a worn brick building with peeling paint and a faded sign above the door. A couple of people lingered outside smoking, their shoulders hunched against the wind. Inside, the air was warm but heavy with the smell of coffee, detergent, and too many bodies in one space. A woman at the front desk greeted Alvarez with a tired but polite smile. You hear about the young man from last night? She asked. He nodded. Mr. Hale is here to help identify next of kin. She glanced at me with soft eyes. I'm sorry for your loss, she said gently. I didn't know how to respond to that, so I just nodded. She led us to a small office in the back where a plastic storage bin sat on a table. These were his things, she said. Not much, but he kept them close. When she left, Alvarez opened the lid. Inside were a few clothes, a paperback novel, a metal water bottle, and a worn notebook. He handed it to me. Go ahead. My fingers hesitated on the cover before I opened it. The first few pages were filled with messy handwriting. Dates, short entries, fragments of thoughts. I flipped forward slowly, then I froze. Because halfway through the notebook, a name appeared. Marcus Hale, my name, written again and again across several pages, and under it a sentence. I think I finally found him. A chill ran straight down my spine. I looked up at Alvarez, my mouth suddenly dry. I don't understand, I whispered. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he pointed to the next line in the notebook. I followed his finger and read the words that made my stomach drop. If he won't see me, I'll still leave him the truth. I stared at the sentence for a long time. If he won't see me, I'll still leave him the truth. The words felt heavier than the notebook itself. I never refused to see anyone, I said quietly. I didn't even know he existed. Alvarez nodded slightly. Which means something must have happened between the time he found your name and the time he died. I turned the page. More writing. More dates. The entries were scattered, sometimes days apart, sometimes weeks. The handwriting changed too, like he'd written some of it outside in the cold, others in a rush. One entry caught my eye. Saw him today. I think it was him, same face as the old photo. Didn't have the courage to go inside. I felt my chest tighten. Inside where? I whispered. I flipped back, searching. A few pages earlier, there it was again. Boys. Warehouse district. He still works there. I leaned back in the chair, stunned. He came looking for me, I said. Alvarez's brow creased. You're still working? I retired last year, but I stayed on part-time consulting at the logistics center. Same building I've been at for 20 years. I swallowed hard. He was there. Suddenly the last few months replayed in my head like someone had switched the lights on. A man I'd seen once near the loading dock. Another time in the parking lot, standing by the fence. A third time outside the diner across the street. At the time, I hadn't thought anything of it. People pass through industrial areas all the time. But now, I rubbed my face slowly. I thought he was just another guy looking for work. Alvarez didn't interrupt. I flipped another page. I almost went in today. Watched him through the office window. He looks tired. Older than I imagined. Didn't want to shock him. Didn't want him to think I was after something. My throat felt tight. I turned another page. I don't need anything from him. Just wanted him to know I'm real. I had to stop reading for a second, because the weight of it was sinking in. This man hadn't been trying to trick me. He'd been trying to approach me. Slowly. Carefully. Like he was afraid I'd reject him. Why didn't he just talk to me? I whispered. Alvarez spoke gently. Maybe he didn't know how. I kept flipping. More entries. Found out he lives outside town. Too far to walk. Saved bus money. Might try tomorrow. Still not ready. What if I'm wrong? What if he doesn't want me? Each line hit harder than the last. Because none of it sounded like manipulation. It sounded like fear. Real fear. The last few pages of the notebook were written more shakily. Cold getting worse. Shelter full tonight. I think I waited too long. If I don't make it, someone should tell him. I stopped there, unable to keep reading. The room felt quiet again, but heavier than before. I closed the notebook slowly and set it on the table. He tried, I said. He actually tried to find me. Alvarez nodded once. We also found something else in his backpack. He reached into the bin and pulled out a small envelope. It had my name written on the front. My heart thudded once, hard. Was this mailed? I asked. No, he said. Looks like he was planning to deliver it himself. I turned the envelope over. It wasn't sealed. My fingers hesitated before sliding the paper out. Inside was a single sheet, folded neatly. I opened it. The handwriting was the same as the notebook, but more careful, like he'd taken time with it. Marcus, I don't know if I have the right to call you Dad. Maybe I don't. I don't know the whole story. I only know what my mother told me before she died, that your name was Marcus Hale, and that you didn't know about me. My vision blurred for a second. I forced myself to keep reading. I'm not looking for money or anything like that. I just wanted to see you once. Just to know if I got my face from you. My throat tightened. If you don't want anything to do with me, that's okay. I understand. I just wanted you to know I existed. I lowered the paper slowly. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Alvarez asked quietly, Did Lena ever try to contact you after she left? I shook my head. No. We broke up, she moved to another state, and that was it. I never heard from her again. But even as I said it, something nagged at the back of my mind. A memory I hadn't thought about in decades. A letter. I hadn't opened it at the time. I'd been young, stubborn, angry about the breakup. I remembered tossing it into a box with old paperwork when I moved apartments years later. My stomach sank. I might have missed something, I said quietly. Alvarez leaned forward slightly. What do you mean? I exhaled slowly. There was a letter from Lena years ago. I never read it. The words felt heavier once they were spoken. Because suddenly this wasn't just about the man who'd died. It was about something I might have ignored for decades. I looked back at the envelope in my hands. I think I need to go home, I said. I need to check something. Alvarez nodded. All right, but Mr. Hale, before you go. I looked up. We'll still need confirmation, DNA most likely. I nodded. Yeah, I know. I folded the letter carefully and slid it back into the envelope. As we left the shelter, the wind outside had picked up, colder than before. I stepped onto the sidewalk feeling like the ground under my life had shifted. Because now there was a very real possibility that I hadn't just lost a stranger. I might have lost a son I never knew I had. The drive home felt longer than the morning had. I didn't turn on the radio, didn't check my phone. The only sound inside the truck was the low rumble of the engine and the steady rhythm of my thoughts crashing into each other. A son. The word still felt foreign in my head. I pulled into my driveway just after noon. The place looked exactly the same as when I'd left that morning, quiet, still, ordinary. But I didn't feel the same. Inside, the house felt colder than usual. I walked straight past the kitchen and into the spare room that had slowly turned into storage over the years. Boxes stacked along one wall, old files, photo albums, a life packed away in cardboard. If that letter was still anywhere, it would be here. I knelt on the floor and started pulling boxes down one by one. Old tax returns. Manuals from appliances I didn't even own anymore. Yellowed envelopes from banks that had long since merged or closed. I worked through them methodically, though my hands shook the entire time. Half an hour passed, then another. Dust coated my sleeves. My knees ached. I was about to stop when I found a smaller box buried behind a stack of folders. It was labeled in my own handwriting. Old mail keep. My chest tightened. I set it on the floor and lifted the lid. Inside were letters from years ago, birthday cards, bills, holiday notes. I flipped through them slowly. Then I saw it. A thin envelope with no return address. Postmarked 30 years back. My name written across the front in careful, unfamiliar handwriting. I knew instantly. This was it. My fingers hovered over it for a second before I picked it up. The paper felt fragile, like it might crumble if I squeezed too hard. I sat down on the floor before opening it. The flap tore easier than I expected. Inside was a single folded page. I unfolded it slowly. The ink had faded slightly, but the words were still clear. Marcus, I don't know if you'll read this or not. Maybe you've already moved on, and maybe you don't want to hear from me. But I have to tell you something before I disappear from your life completely. My stomach dropped. I kept reading. I'm pregnant. I found out 2 weeks after I left. I didn't tell you because you made it clear you didn't want anything serious. I didn't want to trap you or make you feel responsible. My hands trembled. I'm moving to Nevada to stay with my sister. I'm going to raise this baby on my own. You don't owe me anything. I'm not asking for money or help. I just thought you should know that somewhere in the world you have a child. The room felt very still. I read the last line twice before it fully sank in. If you ever want to find us, my sister's address is on the back. I turned the page over. An address was written there, but below it, a second note in different ink, clearly added later. We moved again. I'll try to write once things settle. I exhaled slowly. I never got another letter, because I never even read the first one. I sat there on the floor, the paper in my hands, feeling like time had folded in on itself. All those years, and the answer had been sitting in a box 10 feet from where I slept. My phone buzzed in my pocket, making me jump. It was Detective Alvarez. I answered immediately. Yeah. Mr. Hale, he said gently. We got preliminary info from the shelter staff. The young man's name was Ethan Cole. That's the name he used. Anyway, no official records yet tying him to you, but we'll need a DNA sample. I looked down at the letter again. I found something, I said quietly. Something important? Yeah, you. I took a breath. I think he really was my son. There was a pause on the line. I'm sorry, Alvarez said softly. I swallowed, my throat tight. So am I. That afternoon I drove back into town to give the DNA sample. The technician swabbed the inside of my cheek while explaining the process, but I barely heard her. My mind was stuck on one thought. He tried to find me, and I never even knew he existed. When I left the lab, the sky had darkened again. Snow threatened in the clouds, the same kind of cold that had taken him. I sat in my truck for a long time before starting the engine, because now there was nothing left to hide behind. If the test confirmed what I already knew deep down, then somewhere out there was a life I'd missed entirely, and a goodbye I never got to say. That evening, back at home, I laid the old letter next to the one from his backpack on the kitchen table. 2 pieces of paper, 30 years apart, both telling the same story. I didn't notice the knock on my door at first. It came again, louder this time. I frowned and got up. When I opened the door, a woman stood on the porch. Mid-50s maybe, wind-blown hair, nervous eyes. Are you Marcus Hale? She asked. Yes. She swallowed. My name is Claire. I'm Lena's sister. The world seemed to tilt slightly. I heard about what happened, she said softly. And there's something you need to know about Ethan. My chest tightened, because somehow I knew this wasn't the end of the story. For a moment, I just stared at her, Lena's sister. A piece of the past standing on my porch, like it had been waiting there all along. I didn't know she had family still in the area, I said slowly. Claire gave a small, tired smile. We didn't. Not for a long time. But when I saw the news about the unidentified man they were trying to trace, something told me to check. She hesitated, glancing past me into the house. Can I come in? I stepped aside automatically. She moved into the kitchen, taking in the quiet space like she was trying to map it to a version of me she'd only heard about. Her eyes fell on the 2 letters spread across the table. She nodded softly. So you found Lena's note? Yeah, I said. 30 years too late. She didn't argue with that. Instead, she pulled out a chair and sat slowly, like she'd rehearsed this moment 100 times, and still didn't know how to start. I should have come sooner, she said. But Lena didn't want to force anything. She believed if you were meant to know, you would. I leaned against the counter, arms crossed, not trusting my legs to stay steady if I sat. What happened to her? I asked. Claire exhaled. She raised Ethan by herself for years, worked 2 jobs, did everything she could. She never married, never even dated seriously again. I swallowed hard. She talked about you sometimes, Claire added quietly. Not in a bitter way. Just like you were part of a chapter that ended before it could really start. I looked down at the letters. When did she die? 6 years ago, Claire said. Cancer. The word landed heavy. She didn't want Ethan to contact you while she was alive, Claire continued. She was afraid it would reopen things for you. But before she passed, she gave him your name again. You said if he ever felt ready, he should try to find you. I rubbed a hand over my face. He tried, I said quietly. I saw his notebook. Claire nodded, her eyes softening. He told me about that. Said he wasn't sure how you'd react. He didn't want to show up and make your life complicated. I let out a breath that felt heavier than it should have. He didn't want anything, I said. He just wanted to meet me. Claire's voice dropped. Yeah. Silence settled in the kitchen for a moment. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope. There's one more thing, she said. Lena asked me to give this to you if you ever learned the truth. She slid it across the table. I hesitated before picking it up. From her? Claire nodded. She wrote it before she died. Told me not to send it unless Ethan found you or something happened to him. My chest tightened as I opened it. Inside was a short letter written in a steadier hand than the old one I'd found earlier. Marcus, if you're reading this, it means Ethan found you, or at least tried to. I hope he did. He's a good man. Kind. Stubborn, a little too proud for his own good. He got that from you. I swallowed hard. I never told you because I didn't want you to feel trapped or guilty. But I always hoped one day he'd know where he came from. Not for money or anything like that, just so he wouldn't feel like half his story was missing. My vision blurred slightly. If you're meeting him now, I hope it brings you something good. And if you're reading this because he didn't make it, I'm sorry. He deserved better than the life he got. I lowered the paper slowly. The kitchen felt very still. Claire's voice came softly. He never blamed you, you know. I looked up. He always said if you didn't know, then it wasn't your fault. That didn't make it feel any lighter. Because knowing now didn't change the fact that he'd spent his whole life wondering about me. And I'd spent mine not even realizing he existed. I sat down finally, feeling the weight of it settle into my bones. What happened to him after Lena died? I asked. Claire sighed. He struggled. He'd always worked odd jobs, but after she passed, things got harder. He moved around a lot, said he wanted to find you first before settling anywhere. I nodded slowly. He almost did, I said. Claire's eyes filled slightly. Yeah. We sat there for a moment, the silence not uncomfortable, just heavy. Then she reached into her bag again. There's one last thing I thought you should have, she said. She pulled out a small photograph and slid it toward me. It was newer than the old one from the wallet. In it, a grown man stood beside a small roadside diner sign, smiling slightly into the sun. I recognized the place instantly. It was the diner across from my workplace. My stomach dropped. He took that himself, Claire said. Sent it to me last winter, said he thought he was getting close. I stared at the photo, realizing he'd probably stood there watching me go in and out of that building, trying to work up the courage to talk. I swallowed hard. Did he say anything else to you? I asked. Claire hesitated. Just one thing, she said quietly. What? She met my eyes. He told me if he ever met you, he wasn't going to ask why you weren't there. My throat tightened. He said he was just going to say, "Hi, Dad." The room went completely silent. And for the first time since that early morning phone call, I felt the full weight of what I'd lost.